going to have that explained because I forgot. We did meet with Tom. He needs to explain it before we go in, or else. Okay. I'm starting my timer in 3, 2, 1. Are you ready? Okay. All right, this is a work session. And why don't you guys go ahead and introduce yourselves and explain why it is you're here, and then we can roll on this, because I'm not sure I've seen it.
Thank you, Jackie. I'm Ralph Trapani with Parsons Transportation Group. We're assisting RAFTA with the development of the Integrated Transportation Systems Plan. And with me tonight is David Johnson, Director of Planning for RAFTA. No taker. Dan Blankenship sends his regrets. He said David can handle any and all questions in his absence.
Probably better, actually. Just kidding. Okay.
At least they get a chance this time, right?
I know.
Well, if it's all right, I'll start in.
Please.
Do you all look at this screen typically? I don't know.
People who are more on the corners look back there, but I don't look back there. I look over there.
Well, I'll work off of this screen then. Anyway, this is an update for basically the completion of the Stage 2. And we've been doing this road show now, when did I first start? Seems like late February. We've still got a couple more meetings to go, but we really appreciate the opportunity to come up and talk to Basalt.
Could you just also, as we go along, because not everybody eats, drinks, and sleeps this like we do, just kind of say in a word, what was Phase 1? What does this initial stand for? You know.
I have words and I have cartoons also.
If you've got cartoons, I'll wait.
All right. Well, thanks again. My agenda for tonight is to go through the Integrated Transportation System Planning process. I'm going to quickly go through the ridership estimation tool. I want to present the ridership forecast for the planning horizon, which is year 2036, and how the alternatives respond to those forecasts, and let you all know what the next steps are. So let me just jump right in. I know this is familiar for people that are on the RAFTA board. This is the Integrated Transportation Systems Planning process. It kind of winds back and forth across. We kicked off last March, it's been about a year ago now, and went through the initial stage, the Stage 1, which is in red, which is called Define the Vision. We did public outreach. We convened a technical advisory committee. Susan's on that committee. And we went through and developed some vision statements and got some pretty good outreach information, which I'll get into later. We did do an organizational capacity and efficiency review report. The results of that were no surprise. RAFT is an incredibly efficient organization, one of the most efficient transit organizations in the country from what we could see. And that rolled us into Stage 2, and that's what we're finishing up right now. And Stage 2 is determine future needs. It's developing the transportation forecast and ridership demand model. We've looked at some of the land use issues, population and employment growth. And we're right now wrapping that up, and this is kind of what I want to give you all an update on. We're now into just beginning Stage 3, which is actually looking at the options that'll take us into this last stage, which is Stage 4, which is establishing the financing plan, trying to develop revenue sources, financing strategies, and so on, and I'll talk about that towards the end of the presentation. So with that, probably more likely early 2018, we'll complete Phase 1, and what the completion will be is basically an implementation document, a document that RAFTA can follow kind of as a blueprint for the next 20 years for various transit service plans and other improvements. So let me move ahead, and I'm going to quickly go through the ridership estimation tool. Really, this is just a quick summary of what this tool does and how it works. It uses the absolute best available data as a basis for development. If any of you that have heard about the cellular data or the AirSage data, that data is now loaded into the ridership forecasting model. It's a spreadsheet-based model. It's a very it is relatively simple Excel spreadsheet. It's just that there's about 100 of them that go along with it. You can calibrate it for actual conditions. You can update your forecasts. You can transfer information easily into other planning tools because, again, it's an Excel spreadsheet, and everything talks to those. what we did to develop the initial set of travel data or transit data was split the raft to travel shed into about 43 internal zones, and those internal zones follow the travel shed from Parachute down I-70, up Highway 82 to Aspen. Of course, we pick up Carbondale. So there's 42 or 43 of those, and if you could see it as close as you'd see there were probably 10 zones in Glenwood, probably closer to 15 of them in the Upper Valley area. I believe we've got about 2 or 3 zones in the Basalt area. Then, of course, we've got the external zones, and an external zone means you enter the raft to travel shed. So one of those external zones is obviously coming in from Grand Junction on I-70, coming in from the west, coming in from the north on Highway 13, coming in from the east on I-70, which is the Gypsum Eagle area, then coming over McClure Pass on Highway 83 and entering the travel zone at Carbondale, and then in the summer, of course, coming over Highway 82 and entering the travel zone into Aspen, but that's a seasonal event. But anyway, we've got these 43 internal zones and 3 external zones, and I'll talk about how we generally define the area. So what we did was we rolled up those 43 zones into these basic communities, as we call them, or general areas, because it's pretty difficult to manage data set otherwise. So we collected data for 3 seasons, fall, winter, and summer. And to give you an idea, the summer season was probably in late July into August, and we're talking about 2016 now. The fall season was October. The winter season tended to be March, and that was again March of 2016. We collected data so we could avoid things like X Games, 4th of July, some of those big events. We wanted more normal time periods. And speaking of time periods, we collected for 4 times a day, AM, midday, PM, and of course then an overall daily. We look at weekday and weekend, and then the trip is classified into a home-to-work trip, a work-to-home trip. You can interchange work and school, it doesn't matter, but there's 9 different trip classifications that the data comes to us in.
Rob, are you going to talk about what AirSage is? And
I can do that just briefly.
just briefly,
Yeah.
because, I mean, if you don't know what it is, this is not very meaningful.
Okay, well, we've done so many presentations on AirSage, I wasn't sure who had heard about it, but let me just quickly explain what AirSage is. AirSage is a data company, basically. When you hear about big data, that's a company like AirSage. They purchase, so what they do is, they purchase, for the time periods that we're talking about here, all the cellular data from Verizon that's available. And when I say cellular data, what that data comprises is your activity. So when you're sitting in a place for 5 minutes and then you start moving, you're all of a sudden being mapped as a trip. So when you're moving, that trip is being assumed to be a trip, and then when you stop again for 5 minutes or more, your trip ends. So if you've got let's use an example here. Somebody's leaving Basalt and going to Willits. When you leave Basalt and you start moving, that becomes a trip. And when you stop at Willits for 5 minutes or more, your trip ends and it gets logged as one trip from this travel zone to that travel zone. The data is anonymized. There's no way to tell who it was or what the phone number or anything was. That's an important part of this data. We don't know who's making the trip. We just know that the trip occurred. We don't know what the mode of the trip is. We do know the time. Time of day, time of week, and the classification of the trip, but we don't know the mode. It could be on bicycle, on foot, it could be on a bus, it could be in a car. So that's, you'll see when I talk about how the forecasting tool works, what we do to pull out the transit trips from that data. So a couple of obvious questions that I'll lay on you. First of all, what if you don't have a Verizon cell phone? Well, AirSage has got demographic data, and they've got a way to escalate the number of calls up to 100% of the population. So they do this all over the country. So they know that some of us have T-Mobile, some of us maybe have another cell phone service, although Verizon is predominant here, but they've got a way to escalate the data to 100% users. So if you don't have a cell phone, that still gets considered as part of escalating the data set. And one other thing, when your cell phone is on, you are always being tracked, apparently, even if you're not able to talk on your phone or you're in a shadow or something, it's still tracking you. That was news to me because, I'm up skiing perhaps and I can't get a cell phone call at the top of Highlands, but that the Verizon people know where I am. And so you don't get missed if you're not within what you consider to be talking range of your cell phone. You're still getting tracked around. So in a nutshell, that's where the AirSage data was generated. In the old days, the way we got that data was by stopping cars, counting the number of people, asking what the purpose of the trip was. We did that back in 1993 when it was over at CDOT. We spent more money on law enforcement for that than we did actually on managing the data. So you can't do that anymore. But in more modern times, an option to develop to using this cellular data might be license plate surveys where you take pictures of license plates, and that's not as accurate. Our transit modelers at Parsons say this is the gold standard for data. This data was purchased in a partnership between Aspen Ski Company, RAFTA, and the EOTC. All those three entities kicked in the roughly $100,000 that it took to purchase that data.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, let me keep moving then. So we've...
They're riveting, Ralph.
Okay. Well, I really have a fancy AirSage slide, but every time I put it up, I get questions I can't answer, so I put that one away. So anyway, so within the data set then, we classify the traveler types, and again, AirSage has the ability to do that. For example, a resident worker is somebody that might live within the study area and commute within the study area. Somebody commuting from Basalt to Aspen would be considered a resident worker. A home worker is somebody that would live in Basalt and work in Basalt. Then, of course, we've got people, and these are less sort of travel patterns, but these are people that commute to the study area from an external area, like somebody that lived in Paonia and maybe commuted over here to clean rooms or something like that. That would be an inbound worker. Then somebody that commuted from our study area to an external area, again, highly unusual, but perhaps somebody that lived in
Missouri
let's
Heights
say-
and went to Colburn.
Okay, there you go. Do you do that trip often, Davis?
I do that every week.
Okay, well, he would be counted as that kind of trip. And then, of course, we've got the people that live outside the study area, the single-day visitor, the multi-day and repeat visitor, and AirSage has an ability to track that also. Those tend to be more important in the resort towns. Glenwood, I consider Basalt that might be important for, and also certainly it's important for Aspen. So those are the traveler types that we're generating. This is what the ridership table looks like, and this is a simple table, but let me fire up my pointer here. What the actual spreadsheet looks like, that's every bus stop in the RAFTA travel shed. We just rolled this up for Aspen, Snowmass, et cetera. So what we'll do is fill in these cells. So if we want to tell how many people are going from Basalt to Old Snowmass, you would look in that cell where Basalt crossed the Old Snowmass line. Simple enough, whatever number is in that for any given day of week, any one of those periods, you could tell the numbers of trips. So what the overall ridership forecasting tool looks like is many, many spreadsheets like this with the RAFTA transit stops across the top and across the side. When these are all filled in, we have 2.8 million pieces of data. So that's why I don't like to show the exact spreadsheet. In fact, my modeler doesn't even like showing it to me. So we didn't want to show that one around. But this will give you an idea of how this looks. So the way we develop that spreadsheet is somewhat complicated, but I want to just go through it quickly. We've got very good data from RAFTA, the ridership and survey data. They electronically count people getting on and off the buses, and that generates a transit trip table, and that's transit trips. Then we've got the AirSage data set that I've been talking about. That gives us an overall person trip. That's active transportation, driving, transit, the whole 9 yards. And by combining those tables, we end up with a percentage of all trips made by transit. And then that takes us to escalating this to the future transit ridership in year 2036. So to do that, we take those current transit shares in 2016 and input our forecast population and employment data that came out of a land use analysis. We had a local sub-consultant, Leslie Lamont, some of you may know Leslie, do that. We pulled population and employment data from the demographer. They had 2010 and 2014, and we updated it to 2016. So that's the data set that we use then to develop the future transit ridership. Let me keep going here because this will start making a little more sense in a minute. So you can take that 2036 future transit ridership, and then you can start looking at various service plan alternatives, local express service plan alternatives, and let me explain what a BRT service alternative might be. Right now, Raft has got excellent, what we call headways. There's a BRT going every 10 minutes, basically, for the majority of the day. That sort of service plan was required by the Federal Transit Administration, who bucked up about 50% of the funding for this BRT project. That RAFTA was required to run on that service plan for 2 years after the ribbon was cut on the BRT. Well, that 2 years was up last September, so now RAFTA's got the ability to go in and run new service plans, and RAFTA's actually going to be doing that in stage 3 as an alternative. They do that very well, and we'll be assisting them, but they'll be using the ridership tool and their own software to look at those. So one of the alternatives we're looking at is, we've heard during the midday that there's too much BRT service and not enough like local and express service, so that's going to be a service plan that RAFT will run. Maybe there's an opportunity to go to 30-minute headways with a BRT and take that savings and invest it into maybe more local buses, because if you're standing at Old Snowmass trying to catch a BRT, you're going to see a bus go by every 10 minutes, and then every 30 minutes maybe a bus will stop. At the midday, that type of adjustment to service plan might more accurately fit the kind of service that might be required as time goes on. So that's the benefit of using this data. Let me give you some of the basic numbers that we got, and I'm going to keep this really simple, but even though this is simple, it's important that I kind of set the table for what the 2036 data is telling us. First of all, these are high-level summaries just for winter and summer. I didn't want to bore everybody with fall. These were the data that I'm presenting today is from the transit trip tables. The 2036 data is a no-build assumption, and what that means is all the RAFTA service is as it is today. There's no changes in service alternatives like I was just describing. It's just as you see it today. And it assumes that the transit share will remain constant. So whatever percentage of people are using RAFTA now, in this data that I'm presenting you, will be that same percentage of people. So the data I'm about to present is really the existing RAFTA ridership base expanded for population and employment only. It doesn't consider what happens when gas goes to $4 a gallon. It doesn't consider what happens on a snow day. Nobody else can model the weather, so don't expect our model to model it. So it doesn't consider things like that. It doesn't include any specific new developments. In other words, any developments that are maybe being talked about around here, that's already built into the population and employment data that we're using, with one exception, and that exception is the Aspen Airport, Sardi Field. We do have a value of 3% roughly transit ride share, and we're using that escalated number out in 2036 because that appears to be a given from the development plan at the airport. But that's the only additional ridership that we considered over what the demographers gave us for the ambient population and employment growth. So let me just go through these numbers quickly. So system-wide, and this would be for the entire RAFTA travel shed, in the winter, weekday, we're looking at about a 27% increase in ridership between 2016 and 2036. And that breaks down into about a 36% increase on the Highway 82 corridor, again, roughly even between the BRT and the local. The Grand Hogback route, which is is the route that runs from Parachute. Did I do that? I hope I didn't. The Grand Hogback runs from Rifle to Glenwood, and when the Grand Avenue Bridge gets changed up this summer during the detour, it's going to run from Parachute to Glenwood. But that's temporary service, and when the Grand Avenue Bridge detour is done, that'll go away. Thank you. So you can see again, there's a pretty good increase in ridership on that route, 71% increase. And again, it's not a lot of passengers, but the action is out in West Garfield County. That's where the majority of the population growth is going to be in the next 20 years. Then we've also pulled out, this is Snowmass Down Valley and Down Valley to Snowmass. Again, we're looking at a fairly substantial increase in those direct Snowmass routes between now and 2036 also. Again, those are some, that 27% increase is a pretty substantive number in my opinion. So how do we respond to that? Well, I'm gonna pick on the Grand Hogback route. It's kind of low-hanging fruit at this point. So some of the alternatives we'd look at would be accessing, getting better public transit information out there. We're working with RAFTA now to see if they can't start using Google Transit as an app, things like that. Of course, expanding the service, it looks like that's necessary because it's increasing by 71%, so there's an apparent need for expansion. Some bus stop improvements along the I-70 route, and also park and ride improvements in Silt, Rifle, and Parachute. Newcastle has a park and ride now, so we didn't mention them. They've got a nice little park and ride now. So let me talk about the summer. Again, similar numbers. We're looking at a 21% system-wide increase in summer. You can read down, the increases tend to be a little more modest, but again, snow mass is still almost a 45% increase. So what are we gonna pick on here? Let's take a look at the State Highway 82 corridor that's gonna be looking at a 26% increase. Again, the alternatives we'll be analyzing include optimizing the BRT system, for example, the service plan change that I talked about a moment ago. Better transit connections to Snowmass Village and Brush Creek Road, again, to try to address this increase in demand up there. WeCycle, of course, expansion is a popular thing to help with the first and last mile, along with microtransit, which is on-demand transit services, perhaps. Transportation demand management is critical. Aspen's doing an outstanding job. They've got a TDM program up there that's probably better than most in the country, but that's not kind of systemic. Really, Aspen's got a very strong TDM program. Depending on where you look, the rest of the communities either don't have one or have perhaps a not quite as robust program. Park and ride expansions in 27th Street in Glenwood, Carbondale, and Basalt. I don't know where that would be. That was something that we'll be getting some input from Susan on as we move ahead through our technical advisory committee. Bus stop improvements, of course, we've got quite a range of bus stops in the Highway 82 corridor. We've got the beautiful BRT stations, and then we've still got the sign and the paddle and the stump to sit on up at Sagewood, for example. I've been working in this corridor for 25 years, and that stop hasn't changed. So I don't know whether it ever will. I hope it does for the benefit of those people that are using it. Of course, we're looking at a couple of pedestrian crossing improvements, one at 27th Street, again, to encourage people to leave their cars home. If they want to use transit, make it easier to walk and ride your bike. And of course, at State Highway 133, at the Carbondale BRT station, there's been a need for a grade-separated ped crossing for a long time there, and that's probably something that would enhance the accessibility for the Carbondale station, which has got an incredible number of bicycles parked at it, in case any of you have ever gone by there. The only place I've seen that many bicycles parked at a transit stop is in Europe. That Carbondale station still blows my mind, and it's been expanded, what, twice since it was built, David?
Yes.
And it's still filled up. But anyway, if you're riding transit, the best place for your car is in the driveway. If you can get that first and last mile resolved, it makes it a lot easier. The BRT would have been $150 million if we had built every parking space that was in demand. It just isn't going to happen. It's too expensive, and we don't have the land to do that. But what I wanted to demonstrate here was really how the ridership forecasting then starts talking to the development of alternatives, which is what we're going to be doing here process-wise for the next few months. And that's it. We're going to be analyzing the options. I'm just going to briefly talk about what we heard in stages 1 and 2 and summarize it by saying everybody wants more transit service. Nobody wants less transit service. Everybody wants more service. Everybody wants easier access for that first and last mile. They want better bike connections. And I can assure you, everyone we talk to, from Parachute to Aspen, wants more transit, which is going to be quite a challenge for RAFTA. As we move into this stage, we're going to be working kind of in this sequence to analyze options. We'll be working with RAFTA to develop those service plan alternatives based on the outreach we received in stage 1 and the ridership forecasting needs we developed in stage 2. We'll be running some capital and O&M costs for each alternative, and then evaluating and comparing the alternatives using the estimation tool and, of course, some kind of a simple evaluation matrix. And that'll be a decision document for the RAFTA board that'll you'll probably start seeing some drafts of that in late summer, I would guess. And of course, there's going to be continued public outreach as part of stage 3. We are going to do another set of public meetings. They were pretty successful because we did it at the transit stops. We did it in Ruby Park in Aspen and 27th Street in Glenwood, so we got captive audience, people getting right off the buses. I'm not going to go through the alternatives. We've got a lot of them. I talked about some of the ones as far as how they relate. I mean, this to me is an interesting one, design places at bus stations for microtransit to drop off and pick up. A lot of people don't know this, and this isn't widely advertised, but the transit stops for RAFTA are available for rideshare. I had to testify in a condemnation hearing here on Holland Hills to that effect. But you can use that as a stop to drop people off or pick people up. Please stay out of the way of the buses, but as time goes on, we think that might become more popular, so perhaps we'll have to do additional work on some of the bus stop designs. I'll just briefly mention the UVMS, that stands for Upper Valley Mobility Study. The Upper Valley communities represented by Pitkin County's Town of Snowmass Village and Aspen decided that they wanted a fairly robust study done again at the entrance to Aspen, and some of you might have read the paper Friday. We had a elected officials transportation committee meeting Friday or Thursday night and presented the costs and the ridership for a light rail transit alternative and enhanced bus rapid transit. I don't want to go into that, but I do want to say the purpose of the Upper Valley Mobility Study was to allow some special attention and resources to be put by the EOTC against this planning process so that they could really get a better handle on what their recommendation is going to be back to RAFTA for what they want the Upper Valley commute and also local movements to be in 2036. So again, I'll keep blowing through these things. Expanded circulators are popular. I think that's probably something that you good folks up here in Basalt are going to want to continue to talk about. One of the things that continues to blow my mind is Bustang and the amount of people that are asking for connections to Bustang, which leaves at Glenwood 27th Street Station at 7 a.m. roughly. I'm amazed at the amount of service that that's creating. When I spoke with CDOT, when Bustang first was envisioned, they intended it to be something for people who had health issues that had to get over to the front slope. I know you probably know people too that are using it to get to the airport, they're using it to get to sports events, and it's incredible to me the amount of pent-up transit demand there is between here and the front slope. So we've been hearing a lot about that, and I think that some of those connections are going to be part of the deal when we start looking at service plans. Again, I've talked about some of the bike ped crossings. Of course, with all this demand we're talking about, you got to replace buses. You've got to expand the Glenwood maintenance facility, Aspen maintenance facility. Also, you've got to house your employees, and we're working with Mike Herms and his group to develop some ideas to look at potential public-private partnerships to accomplish that. That's all part of stage 3. So next steps, just as a review, we're winding up stage 2 here, which was determine future needs. We're rolling into the green boxes, which is analyze options. We're working on these service plan alternatives as we speak, and we'll begin the alternative evaluation going into late spring and early summer, and then this probably later summer, early fall, we'll be developing the financing plan and revenue sources. I think that from what I've seen so far with the new administration in Washington, the likelihood of getting any federal funding for transit is slim to none. That's my personal opinion, but I have seen the 2016 Republican platform. It specifically says no federal funding for transit. So far, the infrastructure program that's come out of Washington has been to cut transit projects. The biggest one being about a $700 million shovel-ready electrification project for trains in California. That job was awarded and ready to go, and that was cut. The point here is that I think the locals are going to have to pay a lot more as time moves on here, unless things change dramatically in Washington. But I just want to provide that at kind of the viewpoint of kind of as we move ahead. Dan's not here, but if you were to talk to Dan.
Gary had a question.
Oh, sorry, Gary.
Well, just stopping on that point.
Sure.
Is, listening to these things, I'm in government, I hear it. The problem is we're gonna have to sell this to the public.
Mm-hmm.
You use very engineering terms for a lot of
Mm-hmm.
the discussion. We've got to connect the people to transportation planning.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things I don't see is that we're not doing that. And how some communication, some new way of thinking of how we look at transportation in general. I think, because when you made the presentation to the AOTC, I think, people are just glazing over because some of these costs are so
Mm-hmm.
enormous and complicated and complex. And I think we've got to find ways to simplify the conversation, because we're gonna have to ask the voters for more money. We're gonna have to ask people for more money. And the only way to really do that is to get them on board early. So it's not really a question, but it's kind of like, something that I've seen talking to people who ride RAFTA all the time and love RAFTA. This is gonna go way over their head.
Mm-hmm. Well, I appreciate that comment, and we received a similar comment after the OTC meeting about, with one of the elected officials, the idea was simply ask people what they want their mobility to look like in the year 2036, which is an interesting starting point. I look at it through the eyes of my 17-year-old and think of what he's going to be doing in another 20 years, because I probably won't be worried about getting around as much in 20 years. But Gary, I appreciate that comment, and we do need to simple this up a little bit when we go public with it. And that is going to be an important mission of the RAFTA board, I believe, as this moves ahead, to help the planning team sort through this and see what the RAFTA board thinks the public can accept and how to interpret that for the public.
Yeah, Bernie?
Well, what surprises me, Ralph, is that number, unless I'm misconstruing it, that says there's only going to be about 1% growth a year in population and employment in this valley between now and 2026, which certainly probably isn't in sync with what our planners are all thinking up and down the valley. How come such a disparity between a 3 to 6% projected growth rate and a one-digit 1% growth rate?
Well, Bernie, we did run all of these population and employment growth factors past the planners in the valleys, and they were accepted by the planners. To help understand this, the majority of the growth occurs in western Garfield County. And I don't have the data in front of me here, and frankly, I'm not smart enough to be able to articulate this, but there's not a lot of growth in the valley. And, like, for example, the one number I remember was Aspen in the next 20 years was expected, and this is the Aspen travel area, not the city of Aspen, was expected to grow from like 11,000 to 13,000 in 20 years, which to me is almost nothing. So I trust your math, but I do want to emphasize that the majority of the growth that we saw was in western Garfield County. And when we made this presentation to the Garfield County Commissioners, I made this exact presentation to them. They were the first ones we presented to. I asked them about what their views were on where is everybody going to work, because when we went to Parachute, people wanted transit service to Rifle, they wanted transit service to Glenwood, and the answer from the commissioners is they're still believing the oil and gas is going to keep that population busy. I don't know that I share that. I mean, I've been working in this valley for 40 plus years, and I've seen boom and bust go. And when things go bust, when things went bust out west in 1981, that's where all of my people came that built Glenwood Canyon. We had nobody to build Glenwood Canyon until the oil shale went under on Black Sunday. So we can make Susan's got access to that data if anybody wants to go and look in detail. I'm sorry, I didn't bring the numbers for Basalt tonight, but I can provide those. David?
I don't have the numbers either, and I can't speak to specific rates of population employment growth. You can see it in the slide. Oh, sorry, thanks. You can see in the slide, one of the slides that we looked at, the forecast into 2036 was based on just population employment growth. And if you look at the Grand Hogback, basically western Garfield County, can we go back to wintertime? So winter increase in trips was 71%, and that's just based on population and employment numbers alone. And I think that the rate of population growth in western Garfield County is supposed to be like 2 to 3%. And when you compound that, that number adds up really quick. In this case, 71%.
Say the state demographer and, their projections of Colorado continuing to be an extremely attractive state for inflow, that just surprises me at how low that number is over 20 years.
Anyway, go ahead.
Well, I'm wrapping up. Let me try to get myself oriented here. Yeah, that's it. We're into questions and discussion, and
Okay. Yeah, Katie, and then
So you'll
Bernie.
be coming back this summer to discuss financing options? Is that summer 2017 step?
The last stage is intended to be the step that we would assist the RAFTA board in developing financing options. I expect that that's probably going to bleed off into late 2017 or early 2018. And because Dan Blankenship's been along and we've gotten a few questions, Dan's talked about a potential tax initiative in 2018, which would be November of 2018. But that's what Dan's talking about. That's subject to the RAFTA board. So it's going to be the RAFTA board's final decision. Did I answer your question, or?
Yes.
Okay.
And I guess I'm just curious about, like what you're bringing up is the obvious option for just taxing the local population.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm wondering if there are alternatives to that, because we're seeing the federal government potentially chopping off significant funding. And one of the things that I ride RAFTA 5 to 6 days a week, and I go by the Aspen Airport. And I avert my eyes because I cannot handle the number of private jets that are there. And I wonder if there's some creative financing where if you choose to have your jet land in Aspen, you pay some type of tax that can then fund our transit here in the valley. And I'm wondering if there can be creative ways like that so that the onus doesn't continue on our population and on riders, because our riders are normal human people making very normal wages. And for the cost to continue to go up is going to force ridership down, more cars on the road, because it seems, at least in the moment, it's cheaper to get in your car than to pay $5 from Willits to get to Aspen. So creative ways of funding, and also reaching out potentially to significant employers in the valley and how they can support their employees getting to their place of work in Aspen.
Well, those are very good points, and those fall under this section that's hard to see, but it's identification of revenue sources. And your point is well taken, particularly at the airport. I believe we have to do what you're suggesting. You can't raise property taxes to any great extent. And one of the issues that I'm confused about is there's a bill in the state legislature now for a half-cent sales tax. I'm confused about what happens if that gets passed and we've already got a community like Snowmass Village that's maxed out. I don't know what happens in a case like that. I don't know whether they lose a 0.5% of their tax in lieu of the state tax. But we are going to get to the point where the locals, either through property tax or sales tax, can't handle this anymore. We're very close to getting to maximums in several areas at the upper end of the valley. So your point is well taken, and one of Parsons' roles here, and we do this all over the country for transit entities like RAFTA and bigger, is to help identify some what I call creative financing sources.
Thank you.
Bernie? Yeah, Jim.
Can you fill me in on what percentage of our area population utilizes RAFTA currently?
Well, I can throw a few numbers at you and turn it over to David. The number that I throw out constantly to other transit agencies and other transit planners is, in the AM, in the summer, 40% of the people going into Aspen are on RAFTA. 40. That is unprecedented. I don't know of anywhere else in America where that many people commute on transit into a community. I mean, the New York City and their subways don't even come close to that. RTD and the people taking fast tracks don't even come close. I think, frankly, it's almost a little unbelievable from a transportation planning perspective of that high a percentage going into Aspen in the morning. If it wasn't for everybody riding the BRT and making use of those dedicated bus lanes, that economic engine, in my opinion, would stop, because you have to have people to provide those goods and services. And with a one-lane entrance the way it is, and that's going to be like that for a long time, you can't keep that going unless you're getting people in some other way. System-wide, David, do you have any numbers or, off the top of your head?
Yeah, we did do a travel pattern study in 2014. We didn't use the cell phone data. We surveyed people and employers. And granted, it probably wasn't a completely representative survey. We did our best. But according to that, approximately 9% of all trips in the region were done by transit.
Okay.
Which is good because nationally, overall, the national rate is about 3%. So we do about 3 times the national average. And if you look at a place rural areas, we're probably 10 times the rate of a rural area.
And speaking,
Average rural area.
speaking of 3%, amazingly enough, that's the number of transit trips that are used by people using Aspen Airport. It seems like it would be higher, but it's not. But that's current data from the airport is 3% of the people using the airport are using transit, and I would hope that that could be improved upon at some point.
Definitely, and your figures just completely back up how reliable, easy, and affordable RAFTA is, and what an asset it is to our community, and how coveted it is by other Colorado rural communities. So kudos.
Well, RAFTA is the second biggest transit system in Colorado behind RTD, and it's my understanding it's the largest rural transit system in America. If we want to choose to call ourselves rural up here, I'm not sure what we are anymore, but something between rural and urban.
Well, we have about a couple minutes left, but in the meantime, thank you so much for bringing this forward. I think Gary's point is well taken about how do you get this information to regular people? Because quite honestly, I've been doing this my whole life, it feels like, but even for me, it's boring and dry. So I think we need to work on this towards the end of 2017 for sure.
Well, we welcome any and all ideas. That is one of the biggest challenges I've had in this profession for the last 42 years is getting people to understand, what's going on and how to get what they want, and making that legible for the common transit user and traveler.
Exactly.
I appreciate that.
Anyway, thank you so much again. We are getting ready to take a break, and we will reconvene here at 6 o'clock, and we have a lot of people waiting to see us, so please try to be back here by 6.
Thank you all.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
everybody again. We are calling this meeting to order at 6 o'clock, and we need a roll call, and our roll call person isn't here. I'll do it. Would you? Just go ahead and say our names.
Okay, Auden,
Here.
Bernie, Kate, Katie,
Katie.
Jack,
Here.
Mark.
I'm here.
Hi, Mark.
Howdy.
I don't know your name.
Gary.
Gary. Oh, I do know your name.
Yeah.
Jennifer.
Here, present.
Okay, thank you. We're gonna pretend like you are the clerk. Okay, as you all know, what?
Does she have the recording?
Oh, I don't know.
If you don't have the recording on, you need
I'll
that.
go get Pam.
John,
Would you?
You definitely need that.
baseball. Help coach?
The TV is running though.
Is it?
Yeah.
He's on the other team, you know that.
No. Still, that team needs help.
John, you're running, right? Okay, good. We already had a roll call, Pam, but it probably wasn't on the recorder.
Minor detail,
Okay, perfect.
till somebody
We're
sues.
good to go. We had a roll call.
We're trying to accommodate
We did that.
the kids, the
Yeah,
community. God forbid.
Yep. Okay, our first item on the agenda is the Students of the Month, which just happens to be our favorite part, right? And this particular student monthly thing is about citizenship. And it means you do your share to make your school and community better. You cooperate, you stay informed, and you vote if you can. You are a good neighbor, you obey laws and follow rules, you respect authority, and you protect the environment. So we are going to share the giving of the awards tonight, and I think we'll start with Jennifer.
All right. Mr. Junior Mauricio Sosa, are you here and can you come on up?
Are you here?
Are you here?
Okay, not here.
Which other student? Well,
Kaylin?
Okay, Gary, do you want to?
Caitlin,
Oh, we think we might have?
you might show up.
Okay,
Uh,
you're on.
Is Alcael Argueta Trejo here? 0 for 2.
All right.
0 for 2. Oh, you're going to do the basketball, guys? Auden, want to go?
Yes, Carla Arce? Is that am I pronouncing that right?
Yay.
Carla, come on up. So, wherever you want, you could come here.
Usually you do, yeah, just don't fall over all that stuff. There you
So
go.
Carla has been a tremendous member of the Makerspace community this year, often coming in, and this is gonna blow your mind, specifically to help fix Rubik's Cubes that other students broke. Can you believe that? That's not an easy thing, that when they break them apart, what's wrong with these people? They drop them. She's cheerful, engaged, as we can see, respectful, helpful, and also took a leadership role in this year's after-school newspaper class in order to report the news on our school. Carla has been a model citizen, a great help, and a much appreciated member of the BMS community. Congratulations.
good job.
And anyone who has Rubik's Cubes that are currently broken,
Congratulations. Oh,
Carla
yes.
will repair them for you.
Have yourself an award, Pam.
Congratulations.
Bernie, do you have?
Caitlin's not here. Is Caitlin here?
Kaylin?
No.
No Caitlin? Are we running short?
Kaylin Williams.
Kaylin.
Kaylin.
Okay. We just got this wrong. The basketball team likes this one.
Okay. Junior, Kaylin is hands down one of the most reliable people in the school. She's always willing to put on a smile and help administrators, teachers, and other students in any way she can. She recently took the initiative to surprise and honor a retiring teacher with flowers at one of our home basketball games. She's often fundraising for school groups or sport teams or helping to organize school events, including this year's prom. We are so appreciative of her peppy, happy, positive attitude, as well as her sense of humor, outstanding generosity, and overall support school-wide. So, and that's from the BHS Athletic Director, no less. Congratulations.
Yeah, really, you're the cheering team.
Congrats.
Oh, pin. Mark, can you,
Caitlin,
I keep forgetting to give out my
What?
pins. Yeah, we gotta do something with that. That's-
And we did
Can
see
you help me
somebody
remember
else
that?
is,
Do you wanna try?
did Junior come in for the Peace Garden?
Mauricio.
Oh, Mauricio. Oh, it's like the junior, he's a junior in high school. Did Mauricio arrive?
Alcal? Nope.
No.
Okay.
neither.
Okay.
Macy. Macy is a good citizen because she cooperates with others to make our class better. Macy is a good neighbor and teammate in class activities. Macy obeys and follows BES and class rules. Thank you, Macy, for setting a great, all in caps, example for other second graders at Basalt Elementary School. Love, Miss Ray Christian, BES second grade teacher.
Way to go.
Way to go. Here's a pen for you.
Oh, thanks, Mark. I just needed that.
Watch the cords.
Yeah, be
Watch the
careful of the
cords.
cords.
Look at the cords.
We gotta get those somehow.
Aw.
We are, I think, eventually. Okay, this award goes to an old friend of mine, Patrick Pilardi. Is he in the room?
Yay!
Okay, Patrick, this is not me writing this is someone else, it's a teacher. I have known Patrick Pilardi since he was a fifth grader at BMS, and he has grown tremendously in 4 years. He is serious, respectful, cooperative, and helpful. He stops by the makerspace every day specifically to see if he can be of help. It doesn't matter what task I assign him, he's always willing to jump in and get the work done for the benefit of others. We wouldn't have completed some of our big projects this year without his assistance. He's a valuable contributor in the BMS community. You can have a whole bunch of pens if you
Congrats.
Thanks, Patrick. Okay. Good job. Okay, for this crew that just got these awards, we just want you to know that you will get a pool pass this summer. So that's another thing besides the wonderful pin that you got. And so we have another large group which you can stay for if you want to because it's the basketball team. So, I have just kind of an introductory remark, and then Mark is going to help me read off the names.
Yes.
Yeah, maybe we'll put them behind us, Pam, so we can get it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, should I begin crying? I will hand this to you. Okay. Over the last 5 years, I'm going to cry already. What is this? Over the last 5 years, leading up to the 2016-2017 basketball season, the Basalt Longhorns won just 20 games. This season, the boys grabbed 21 wins against just 4 losses. One constant in the program has been former Longhorns player turned head coach, Danny Martinez. The boys varsity team reached the state tournament for the first time since 1989 and nearly upset the top-seeded Kent Denver in the quarterfinals. The Longhorns led by 10 points going into the fourth quarter, but Kent Denver clawed their way back into the game to steal the win by 2 points. The loss did nothing to dampen the best season of Longhorns basketball in almost 3 decades. Thanks to a terrific regular season, Basalt senior forward Michael Glenn was awarded the 3A Western Slope League Player of the Year award. Michael Glenn. While Basalt head coach Danny Martinez won the 3A WSL Coach of the Year award for the Longhorns. Woohoo! we have a plan. So Mark Kittle is going to read your names. Come up here, take your award, come behind us, and we're going to have a photo with you at the council, okay? So just march when your name is said.
Number 21, Dylan Gressett.
You gotta stay.
Number 5, Kyle Roberts.
Excellent.
Number 25, Michael Glenn. Number 24, Wade Soho. Number 4, Justin Henderson. Number 3, Kyle Hofferbert. Number 22, my old number, Pedro Rivera. Number 10, Raul Torres. Number 12, Ben Hagg. Number 32, Pablo Rivera. Number 2, Miles Levy. Congratulations, Miles. Number 1, Trevor Roos. Number 34, Wiley Hawkins. Number 15, Goskani Luqueen. Finally, last but not least, number 14, Jake Reardon.
And Danny, could you come up here? Could you come up, Danny, also for the picture?
Hey, Danny. Danny. Congratulations. Way to go, you guys. Awesome.
So, for anybody, I have never really followed the basketball team in Basalt in my life. And then we had an exchange student who lived with us and a superstar who lived right next door to us, Mr. Soho. And all of a sudden, we found ourselves at all the games, and it was like unbelievable. These guys are unbelievable. So, one last time. We got pictures going everywhere. Yeah, you have to be doing pictures. Thank you, guys. Yes, make them.
Hey, can I make a quick announcement? I don't need the microphone.
You do, actually.
No, I'm good.
Gotta be on TV.
No, because they yell
Oh,
at us.
sorry.
Yeah.
I just want to say happy birthday to David Garber here. His birthday today. Great job. Great job.
I know.
We want to recognize Professor Bennett Bramson's CMC business class this evening. Could you all just stand up so we can just see who you are?
No falling asleep.
No falling asleep. Also, we also like to thank Grassroots TV for being here and for broadcasting our meeting live. People can view tonight's meeting live and previous council meetings at www.grassrootstv.org. Our videographer tonight is John Paul Sugata. John, give us a heads up back there. And my one last announcement, if I have any voice left, is on the Wednesdays following our meetings, we have Mayor's Coffee at Saxy's, and tomorrow Davis will be joining, and the police chief will drop by for a little while. It's Starbucks. What did I say? Oh, that's an accident for many years of saying the same thing. Okay. Let's see. So our first regular item is the consent agenda. Are there any questions on that agenda, or is there a motion?
I make a motion that we approve the consent agenda.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you, guys. Council comments, reports, disclosures, managers report, other reports. Yes, Mark.
I was informed earlier, I don't know if it was this week or the end of last week, but we're still on the 2006 building codes. And ISO came in about a month ago and rated
ISO is.
the insurance service organization that dictates what the community's insurance rates are for their houses. We've gone from a 5 last cycle to now a 10, which is the worst. And the only reason for that is because we haven't adopted the new codes. So I would ask Davis to get us in line as soon as possible to adopt the 2015 building codes.
We'll do that. We'll stick it on an agenda in April and get the books ordered and move forward with that.
Good catch, Mark Kittle.
Thanks. That's all I have.
Auden, you have a look
No, I
of,
was just impressed, Mark.
I
That's
know,
good. Seriously,
That's my job.
very impressed.
to impress people.
Oh, no.
Yes. So through our work session with hearing RAFTA's presentation on future ridership and how impressive the ridership is in the valley, I have heard in the Basalt area, looking around right now, there are very few parking spaces. We have downtown is bustling, we have new businesses, there's many employees that are parking in the spaces, and I've heard from many individuals that they are interested in riding their bus, or riding the bus, but riding their bike, that first mile, last mile with their bicycle, but there's nowhere to park their bike and lock it up at these bus stations right outside of Town Hall here. There are some very dated metal bike rack / they look like you could get a newspaper in and out of them, but they're not newspaper boxes. And I'd like to propose that the town consider installing some user-friendly bike racks on both sides of the street there. So that's first one. I'm also very excited about how the town manager search is and interview process is continuing along. There is progress there, and we will have citizen committee interviews along with town council between now and the next council meeting. So that is progressing. Davis has been doing an excellent job, and I want to thank you for your diligence. Another one that we have been working on is many of us walked the Basalt River Park, discussing how to green the area and make it more user-friendly. We're going to discuss that later this evening, but that's very exciting. And I will tell you that we got down to almost counting the number of pieces of grass per square inch to find the appropriate vision so that we can get there. That's exciting. Another one is the mud and flood exercise is taking place on May 7th. I'm going to bring this up every single time so that we can just be ready for it and build the momentum and the excitement about it for having our citizens that live along our riverways to be actually involved in this process. And another one is I want to thank the finance department for the new accounts payable report format. It's very informative, and I look forward to it continuing. And as well, it's brought up some concerns about how our contract labor expenditures are realized and if it is in line with our procurement policy. So we have a policy for how to procure things like trucks and larger services. But I'd like to get more clarity on contract labor expenditures and if it's properly applied to all the various soft service consultants. And it's really the consultants that I'm interested in ensuring that the town is and does have some sort of procurement contract consulting agreement. And other than that, life's sunny in Basalt.
Thanks, Jen. Yeah. Auden, did you have something? Barney?
Yeah, yes, a number of us did go walk the Pan and Fork property to see where we would best be able to put some grass down and make it a park-like experience for this summer. And it got me to thinking, and I've come up with a proposal in my own mind that I would like to at least bring forward as food for thought and hopefully for a council discussion at a later date and ask for some staff support. And that is, after looking at the roadblock or log jam that we've had with deciding the use of the land of the Pan and Fork, how much we're to buy, how much is going to be park, how much is going to be developed and what kind of development, I've finally concluded that the cleanest, best way to do it would be for the town to outright purchase the entire CDC property so that it could take ownership and decide what part would become a park and what part would be subject to development, further development, and would be in a position to control our own destiny as to the amount and type of development we would like to see there. And I realize this has split the community, but I think this last vote came pretty close to telling us the community is very almost evenly divided, and that is if you make people pay taxes to buy land and go into debt. I think there's very little opposition to the idea of using existing taxes, which is my idea, to use existing tax funds, mainly from our open space, our post funds, to fund the purchase of the park. It probably would mean going into short-term debt of some kind, and the price we've already set of up to $2.9 million, which is the appraisal, the official appraisal. And I think that would be the cleanest and best way to break the logjam and move forward without the constant conflict and contest between three different parties: the landowner, the developer, would-be developer, and some parts of the public, some of who want more development, some who want less development. And what I'm asking for council to support me in is requesting that staff do a small financial analysis of what that debt structure would look like from the post fund, and if necessary, we could do an inter-fund loan from the general fund, which we now have we have a $2 million balance, and we are allowed by our policy to use that for unique opportunities. In any case, this would be a very short-term loan which would be paid back, and we would then have the opportunity to pursue a grant from Open Space of Pitkin County, a grant from Eagle County, and GOCO, in which we could retire that debt, replenish our reserves, and use that money to build the park that we all want and would like to see. So that is my request, that you support my asking staff to do this study and have it ready for perhaps April 25th or some later council date where we could notice it and come together and discuss this concept.
that was a mouthful, Bernie. Davis, do you have any?
I can certainly work on pulling numbers together and amounts, contact the owners of the property to see if there's an interest in that, and get it on an agenda towards the end of April.
Thank you. Anybody else? I have one quickie. Yesterday, I went to Carbondale Middle School because a couple of teachers there asked me to go and discuss our safe harbor resolution that we passed here. They have, it was amazing to me, but Carbondale does not have a student council, you know, like I think Basalt's always had. At least I used to go to their council meetings. Anyway, they don't have anything like that, but they do have a small working group, and they look at issues, and basically I just went and told them what we did. I think they're looking at doing something a little bit stronger. I suggested that they run it by their police and their attorney before they did that. But it made me feel good that there's a group of kids who are watching us, at least one group of kids, and it made me very proud that they asked me to come talk, so. All right, if we don't have any more council comments, we've got a manager's report.
Yes. So, we, as you know, we're looking for space for the recreation department. We had looked at an option of buying a manufactured home and placing it in Albany Park. We went out and looked at that. It's got pros and cons. We've also looked at a piece of property, or office space, I should say, over off Cody Lane, and maybe the chief can help me with an address on that. Yep. So it's an upstairs space. It would, my understanding is it would be satisfactory to the recreation department. There is a storage unit kind of across the parking lot, which could serve for storage of some of our stuff, and then overflow, we could use the barn in Albany Park. And based on the two options that are out there, I like the office space better. It's, you know, I have a rough, you know, a non-binding letter of intent to lease, and rent would be approximately $2,700 a month. How big? How many square feet? It's over 1,000. Judy, do you have an? Yeah, it's like 1,000, 1,100 square feet, somewhere in that range. The number's not on here, but it's certainly big enough for, you know, office space, for kids to sign up for stuff, and the owners of the property, of course, want the kids to be well-behaved, which I'm sure they will be. And I'm thinking between the two options and the complexities of the whole discussion that we would move forward with the office space, sign a year lease, and then that would give us time to figure out what the heck we're gonna do after that.
Do you need us to take action tonight, or do we even need to take action? Tom is saying no.
Administrative at this point.
Okay.
Can't take action.
Sounds good. Okay.
Right.
Just a report in.
So if you're okay with that, I will tell you that there is a marijuana shop kind of down the street from there. We've taken a look at that because that's a concern, but this space faces north. It's got parking, adequate parking space for parents to come and drop kids off. It's not looking at the store. If the kids come to the site from the high school, there's a sidewalk. It's on the other side of the street. I don't know if the chief has any comments, but staff went out there today, and staff does not see the pot store as a big issue any more than having one in the downtown area, or, you know, where kids can access that kind of thing. But and for the sake of disclosure, we wanted to let you know that.
Is there anyone that does not want Davis staff to pursue this option?
Can you provide us just a quick overview of what the manufactured home cost is, and?
A rough number, the mobile home is, to purchase is about $52,000 or $3,000. We figured, you know, installation, hooking it up to utilities, all of that is probably another, call it $10,000, $20,000. So we think we could place the mobile home for in the range of 70,000 plus or minus. We would place it temporarily, if that was the option. Still hook it up to utilities. There's as you probably know, there are restrooms in Albany Park that are slated to be removed in 2018. If that were the case, we would slide the mobile home closer to the back of the pool boiler building.
Right.
We would also have to go through our land use process for the more permanent location, which is notice to neighbors and so on. There are some neighbors that would look out on that. It probably looks like a mobile home. You know, it's 16 by 73 feet. And because of that, those factors, it's a less than optimal option. If you said, don't rent the office space, we would have to pursue that option.
Sure. So then my follow-up question is, what's our plan in 12 months? We need to start working on, and I recognize that
Yes.
you will not be at the seat then, but it's an
Correct.
interesting one for us to ponder over is,
Yes.
okay, we take care of this immediately, but we're gonna be in the same seats, in a short period of time, trying to figure out if we continue, because at $2,700 a month, that's $32,000 a
Right.
year, versus a mobile home is $68,000. It's, how,
With resale value.
right, with resale value.
Right.
I'm not proponing for the trailer home, but, just for us to think long-term in our 5-year capital improvement plan, where does this fit in,
Right.
and what is the responsible?
And I think that we probably don't want to go completely down that road now without too much information, but one of the things that Davis and I talked about is the fact that we are going to grow out of this building, and are we going to grow into the building next door? Are we going to have our offices moved to Willits and Southside? So we need to include in that capital improvement plan, our facilities plan for where are we gonna grow to.
Absolutely, and I think, that's part of the conversation. And in 3 months or 6 months, there may be some other pieces of this puzzle that we know about, that we don't know about right now, that will help answer some of those questions.
Sure.
But you're absolutely correct. The town, I have sort of a mental bullet list, which I'll make physical at some point, and looking at the Basalt Town campus, if you will, is something that need is coming closer and closer. We gotta figure it out.
And I want to reflect as well, just after the last meeting when my brain was thinking of creative ways, how can we solve this problem? And I recognize that it's not ideal to have the rec department in this building, because of kids coming in and out. It's been mentioned that it's noisy, whatnot, but we will, and back to Jackie's point, that we will eventually outgrow this building, but we have not. There are empty offices. There are empty spaces, and it's hard for me to swallow $32,000 in rent that we will never recoup when there are empty offices and empty spaces in this building sitting here. As a citizen and as a council person, it just doesn't feel responsible. And
Okay. Some of those spaces, I would note, are fairly small, but.
correct, but you can
yeah.
squirrel away a
If
ton of basketballs in there, and
council said, don't
jerseys.
follow this path, there are not many options left out there, and we would be looking at what we have.
sure.
And we will continue to do that in the long term as well.
Anybody else? Yeah.
So does this space sit empty? Would it sit empty for periods of the year after, or is it gonna be used year round?
The rec office, I think, maybe Judy, if you can help me with that, I think it's around year-round.
Yes.
Yeah,
Oh,
Dorothy,
Dorothy,
come
I'm
Yes.
sorry, Dorothy.
Dorothy, come on up, sit down.
Sorry about
Thank
that.
you. First of all, the space has 2 small offices and a larger office, and then it also has a storage unit. So it's about 1,100 square feet. The idea is leasing it, and then Habitat for Humanity has put together a space at the affordable housing that they're putting up behind the high school, and they've put together a space for recreation. And so as soon as Habitat for Humanity goes forward and builds that, then recreation would be right back to where it was up near the high school. So, yeah, that's, this space, they're asking a year lease. We talked them down, I think $150 or something like that a month. And, any other questions?
Yeah,
What, do we have this in the budget, for the expense of the lease?
We have to approve it, so that's why they have to bring it back, so we're gonna have to approve the extra spending.
right, Gary.
You know, to me, this is, you guys solved the short-term issue, and if you guys are okay with this, I'm gonna be willing to support it and to, you know, move forward with a longer-term solution. I'm happy that we potentially have it. So, to me, this is just something, I don't wanna debate this to death. I'd rather just solve the problem. It seems to work for Dorothy and the rec. It's a popular program. It's a huge need in this community, so I'm good.
Yeah.
The funding, excuse me, the funding for the new rec center at Habitat, they're gonna fund the whole thing for the building?
I think it's land, isn't it?
Yeah.
Oh, it's just land?
Mm.
So we would have to build, oh,
Yeah.
we have to build a building.
Well, Habitat Humanity is building the building.
Okay.
Which
So,
is just part of a facilities planning that we have to do anyways.
Yeah.
Okay.
yeah, so I think that's kind of the answer. I mean, I know that there's some concerns about doing it this way, and it's not ideal probably, but we gotta, it's summer, we gotta be somewhere. And
You know, I think pieces will become more clear as we move to the future, and they're just not clear right now, and we're, you know, I'm not gonna say we're between a rock and a hard place, but we're getting there.
yeah, okay. Thanks, Davis. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dorothy.
Yeah, Dorothy.
Thank you.
Did you have something else?
Yes, I have the next item, and it's the manager hiring process. You have a letter, which I'm happy to share with whoever wants to see it, about the Citizens Committee. So we have a Citizens Interview Committee, we have a Staff Interview Committee, and we have the Council. And on the 21st, we will, starting at 8 a.m. for people to kind of get together and orient, but interviews are projected to start at 9 a.m. and they will probably continue most of the day. And they will be sort of simultaneous. These are confidential interviews with these candidates, and we will, we've got to figure out our space, how we do that. 3 sets of interviews, and people will be rotating through, but you have, in that letter, I kind of outlined how this process will work, and once we complete those interviews on the 21st, we will knock the list down to, say, 2 or 3 finalists who can then be public. And then those finalists will be interviewed by the council. And you will hopefully, that'll be on the 28th of April. And then hopefully when that process is done, you will say, we're ready to make an offer to somebody, and we move forward.
Okay. We kind of got that via email, but I asked Davis to share that with public and the people in TV land. So, thanks, Davis. Did you have anything else?
No, I think that's it for now.
Okay, so the long-awaited citizen comments. So it looks like there's maybe some people out here who have citizen comments. We ask that you come forward to the microphone or next to us, wherever you like, and come on down, Rick. We try to keep our comments to about 3 minutes, including up here, if we can.
I'll find myself. Rick Stevens, I'm here to represent the Aspen Lacrosse Club, and we'll be holding our tournament on May 13th and 14th. It's about the same as it was last year. We're working closely with Crown Mountain and some of the other agencies in the Valley Fire Department and so on. You know, we have some support from Dorothy in her budget, and we've also have some support from, in the past, from the general fund for some traffic control and things like that. They're pretty minor. It's about the same size, may grow a little bit, It's a pretty big event. We've learned a lot over the last few years on how to run an 80-team tournament in a 2-day time frame. So we may need, in the next, maybe by the next meeting in April, we may need a letter of support to encourage cooperation with the other jurisdictions. I don't think there's any issues, but it's always nice to have a letter of support to go along with our traffic control plan and some other things we have to do. And then thank you, Davis, for bringing up the hiring process. I called him the other day when I read my name in the paper, thanks to Mr. Kittle there. And I'm sitting on pins and needles, just wondering what the process is gonna be, and hopefully you guys will figure it out and let the other 6 know what it is, and me, obviously, so. Anyway, thanks, but the
You'll get
tournament's a
that
big
letter
deal.
here very shortly.
Will I? Cool, can I leave with it, or do I have to, no?
You can take the draft if you
No, I'm
want.
just kidding. Anyway, thanks, and thanks for your support. If we come back and ask for it, or I'll stay in touch with Davis and we'll let you know what we need, and otherwise, we're good to go.
Thanks, Rick.
Thank you.
Okay, who's next? Tony? Okay. How are you, Tony?
Good, thank you. How's everyone tonight? For the record, my name is Tony Kronberg, and I think the last time that I was before you was when I put all the pumpkins over in the park to show where the paths go and to show where the boundary lines were. And one of the things that I learned from putting those pumpkins out was that people didn't realize that they could actually walk down through there. And so I'd like to encourage you to move forward with beautifying the park as much as you can, the parcel that you own right now. But there's 3 things I just wanted to speak to you about tonight. The very first thing is a thank you. I wanted to thank you very much for the Basalt Underpass. It is really exciting to see it unfold, and it looks like they're doing a beautiful job on it. The second is, another thank you is, there's a big safety improvement that came about on the highway, and I think it was unintentional, so to speak, but when you come through the light, where south side coming out from the high school and you're going down Valley, as you know, a lot of people would always run into that concrete barrier. Now they have extended the barriers closer to the light so that you can follow the traffic line and you are not pulled into that. So that I hope that when they do the final design, that some type of barrier can separate those 2 lanes. But I didn't want your efforts to go unnoticed, and I wanted you to know how much it's really appreciated. Then the second thing is, of course, everyone always jokes, whenever you come to a meeting, it's always about a swimming pool. And as I think most of you are aware, this past fall, I wanted to do a little experiment to see what the need was or the demand for swimming between Crown Mountain and Basalt. So I taught at the Element Hotel, and I got slammed. I was swamped. And then with winter coming on, and I had to back off from the program. And I have a waiting list right now. In my 42 years of swimming, there's almost over 100 families, which equates to like 300 or 400 families. And that's not advertising, that's just word of mouth. In full disclosure, Crown Mountain Park, I'm trying to get some type of pool facility built down there. It may be an indoor, like small, tiny little thing, could be an outside pool, but what I realized was that Basalt, you really do need a year-round pool. And hearing the news tonight about Habitat for Humanity possibly donating the land, doing the building, that my full support with that. And I wanted to, the third thing that I wanted to do, and I wanted to talk about it now very quickly so that when you do bring up the Pan and Fork property a little bit later, I don't have to make my comments then. But we're all in this resort and community together between Glenwood, Aspen, and Snowmass. And Basalt is right smack, pretty much right smack in the middle of people staying in Glenwood, Carbondale, and coming up to go skiing. The one thing is that pools, you have Aspen and Snowmass. When parents call me, I go, where do you live? Basalt. I'm like, oh, well, we have no pool in Basalt. And so you have Aspen and Snowmass, and then you have Glenwood. The one thing that's in common with all of them is warm water. All of them have warm water. I brought with you, I'd like to pass this out, if I could just pass this down. This is from the website, from Iron Mountain Hot Springs. I don't know if you've been there, but this is the last thing, is that with your Pan and Fork property, I would highly encourage you to think about some pools, some hot tubs, overlooking that ties into the natural beauty. And then Iron Mountain Hot Springs, they had to
expand the locker rooms, expand the parking after 3 months, and that's in Glenwood on the river. But I wanted to bring that forward, and I highly support Bernie's recommendation to you tonight for the town acquiring it.
Thank you,
so much.
Tony.
Did I make my 3
You
minutes?
covered a
Okay.
lot. All right, thank you.
That was a mouthful, but anyway, I want to say thank you so much for everything.
Anybody else? Robin? How you doing, Robin?
I'm well, thank you.
Good.
How are you all?
Good.
So you may have heard that I'm no longer at the Chamber of Commerce, and I wanted to take the opportunity to tell you how much I enjoyed working with all of you over the last few years, elected officials and staff. And thank you for everything, and I look forward to what's ahead.
Thank you, Robin.
Thank you.
That's very nice.
Good luck.
That is very nice. And you've seen about enough of us to know if you like us or not.
I do, I love this all. Thank you
Thanks,
so much.
Robin. Anyone else? Okay. Our items for consideration are liquor license items to begin with, and we need to convene as the liquor authority. Can somebody make a
Mayor, I move
motion?
that the town council convene as the local liquor authority.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Did we miss something? Okay. Okay. So Pam, do you want to kick this off?
You have 3 sit.
They're everywhere on the floor.
Well, those aren't working yet.
Oh, okay. Good evening.
How you doing?
Great, how are you?
Okay, so this can be fairly short and sweet. This is an application for a new hotel and restaurant liquor license for Mez Willets, going to be doing business as Mezzaluna Willets on 941 East Valley Road in Basalt. Applicants are Grant Sutherland and Derek Cave, who's here with us this evening. I hear that's a good thing, that you are with us. And so the property is under construction, so again, we have a lot of contingencies on this liquor license, but the findings of staff that council can find do fit all the restrictions based on staff investigations. The town council is able to make the following findings. No prior licenses have been denied at this location. The applicant has possession of the property for the term of the liquor license. There are no municipal zoning laws prohibiting the sale of alcohol at the applied-for location. The building on the application is not located within 500 feet of any school or principal campus of any college, university, or seminary. The application is complete. Fingerprints and individual history records have been submitted to the state of Colorado and have returned no indication of current violations of concern. So again, this is right around the corner from where Mr. Johnson is doing the Capitol Brewery. And we, again, run into the same kinds of concerns for that, and perhaps you'd like to open the public hearing and allow the applicant to make any comments?
Why don't we let doesn't the applicant go first?
The applicant can go
Okay.
first, certainly.
Did you have anything you wanted to add to what Pam has said? No. All right. Tell us again when you're going to open?
Hopefully end of April, beginning of May.
Sounds good. Okay. This is a public hearing on a liquor license application. So we're going to open the public hearing at 6:50. Is there anyone in the public that has any comments regarding this application? Hearing none, we'll close the public hearing. And I don't have as much stuff as I usually have in here, but I guess we just go to council.
Mayor, I move that the town council approve the Mez Willets LLC request for a new hotel and restaurant liquor license for Mezzaluna Willets to be located at 941 East Valley Road, Basalt, per staff recommendation.
Second.
Further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Good luck.
Yeah, good
Wish
luck.
you the best.
That's it?
That's
That's
it.
it.
I know. It wasn't even like a
Appreciate it.
Don't ask that question.
Thank you, Derek.
That's definitely the question you don't ask. That's it.
Okay, we are still convened as the Liquor License Authority, and our next item is an application for tastings at Jimbo's. Pam?
And Gonzo, may I have you up front, please? Thank you all remember Gonzalo Lirich.
Yeah, hi.
His new application last year when we had to do a public hearing and transfer of a liquor license. At any rate, this year, we are looking, Gonzo would like to open tastings at Jimbo's, and back in 2004, the town adopted an ordinance authorizing liquor stores and liquor licensed drugstores to conduct tastings to sample vinous, spirituous, and malt liquors on their premises. There are certain restrictions, of course, tied to those, and Gonzo's well aware of those. In 2014, the town delegated authority to the town clerk for processing and reviewing certain liquor licensing matters, and these matters allow the town clerk to administratively process liquor license renewals, issue temporary liquor permits, process changes in managers of licenses, issue special event liquor permits, but it did not cover tastings. Therefore, we are before you this evening to request permission for Gonzo to go ahead and conduct tastings at his establishment in accordance with the memos that he's attached to it, the dates, the schedule, and so forth. And hopefully we will get that amended in an ordinance soon, Tom
Okay.
Smith and I.
So that's not a public hearing, correct?
It
It's
is not a
just-
public
okay.
hearing, it's just a motion on council's part.
Do you have anything you wanted to add before we take action?
No, really, no.
Okay.
Just,
Mayor, I move that the town council approve the tastings application at Jimbo's Liquors for the dates and times specified in the application.
Second.
Okay, further discussion? All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Well, that's exciting.
I expect everyone on Fridays, 3 to 7.
Can we put in a special order for our favorite tasting?
Time for two of our-
Maybe not now, but at some point. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Nice.
Mayor, I move to deconvene.
Thanks, Gonzo.
Their authority and reconvene.
I love that. Yes. All in favor?
Aye.
We are deconvened.
Maybe the tasting should be Tuesday nights at
8:30. Okay.
Yeah.
So our next item is the Regional Housing Authority presentation and discussion with Dave Myler and Bill Lamont regarding the creation of a Regional Housing Authority and appointment to the steering committee. Susan, hi Dave.
You know, as I pointed out in the meeting, there were kind of two parallel efforts going on. The Basalt Affordable Community Housing Organization was holding kind of regional housing meetings involving groups from Rafta, Pickens County, Eagle County, and we invited David Myler's group to come and talk about their regional housing authority. And at our last meeting, we had 4 of them. They came and spoke at a couple of the meetings. And the idea of creating a regional housing authority was really, really well received. And at the end of the last meeting, which was in January, the group kind of decided that really, in terms of the regional conversation about housing, that it really should come from this group. So they're here to give a history lesson of what they're up to. What they're asking for us today is indication that the council is supportive of this effort. And then if you are, they're asking that you appoint a representative of the town council to be part of the steering committee that would draft the IGA. The other thing I wanted to point out is Kathy Click added a letter that's in front of you. Kathy Click is the chair of the Basalt Affordable Community Housing Commission, granting support for the group. So, David, do you want to take the lead, or do you want Bill?
Or Bill. Dave and I used to meet in the supermarket and talk about housing and housing needs and planning. And we finally decided last fall that this is something we should get serious about. And Dave, for years, has talked about the Regional Housing Authority and why nobody's using it except Summit County. And so, as we talked, we decided that 2 of us would embark on trying to get the communities in the Roaring Fork Valley primarily to look at the Regional Housing Authority. And the Regional Housing Authority, which Dave can go into some detail on, is formed by local jurisdictions, and it allows you to, it doesn't have to be the whole jurisdiction. In other words, Garfield County could just do the corridor. Eagle County could just do the portion in the Roaring Fork corridor. So that's one of the advantages. The Summit County experience with it, which is the only one in the state that has really taken hold and run with it, was about 2006 when they passed it. They passed it with a sunset clause. Last year, the sunset clause was going to go down, and they went to the voters, and they had a 77% approval rating from the voters to continue the Regional Housing Authority. So it's been tried, it's been done, and obviously proved very, very successful. You know, Basalt always gets 77% or 78% on things you ask for, just like Carbondale. But, so at any rate, that's what we started with. And we started by visiting with the town and city managers, and then progressed to sitting down with the elected officials. And we've met with Newcastle, we've met with Glenwood Springs City Council, we've met with Carbondale's trustees, and we've met with a group that Mike Sampson, County Commissioner, Garfield County, pulled together. We've had 2-3 meetings with them, with the idea that if the local governments in the Roaring Fork Valley primarily, possibly Newcastle, would come together and decide that this is something that you wanted to work towards. The basic premise is providing a permanent source of funding to develop workforce housing. And the idea is that if Basalt goes on its own or Carbondale goes on its own, it's not going to have the volume to really be able to become a very active player in working with the development community to get housing, affordable workforce housing built in the valley. We recognize the commuter issue that is with all of us. We recognize that Pitkin, Aspen, Mid-Valley is feeling a lot of the searching out for housing here for a variety of reasons. So we've visited Basalt's last city council group that we're meeting with. We have met, as I said, with the others. We are due to meet with the Eagle County Commissioners in the next few weeks and visit with them to talk about the concept. Ironically, back in 2005, I believe it was, Basalt, Carbondale, and Glenwood actually created a district. And you can create the district as elected bodies. You can create the district. But to get the funding source, you have to have a vote of the people. And that was never followed through, and it sort of died of its own volition. What we're talking about is the state allows, the statute allows up to a half-cent sales tax or a mill levy up to 5 mills. And so those are your funding sources. You also can have an impact fee that you use. So this is, we have not, obviously, we're not in a position to decide what's the best thing, and that's why we're asking for a steering committee made up of a representative of the elected bodies, because you're the ones that are going to basically sell this, you're the ones that are going to own it, and you're the ones that are going to call the shots on it. So it's the elected officials that need to decide, okay, here's what we think makes sense, and then how do we go about achieving that? We were looking at the possibility of this fall going for an election for the funding sources with a very active program beforehand of trying to educate the public to, one, the need, two, to the opportunity that a housing district provides. And we're looking to, obviously, the elected bodies of each of the communities to be supportive of it if they want to be part of it. There's a lot of decisions that have to be made. Do we include Pitkin County in this? There's advantages to including Pitkin County. Do we include Newcastle in it? So those are the things that the two of us are not in a position to make those big decisions. That really has to come from the elected officials, who then are going to be the ones that explain it to their citizens, who would propose to do a very strong marketing program to educate the public, provide the information that's necessary to get the job done, and include the development community. We've had questions come from some of the elected officials in various communities. Government should stay out of this and let the private sector do it. And we'd be more than happy to bring the private sector in and explain to those people that believe that they would do it if they could make a profit, and without some kind of collaboration with the communities, they can't do it. And so, but that's an educational thing that all of us need to understand, and the best people to explain that is the development community. I'll stop there.
Bill, can I just ask a quick
Yes.
question? Do you have some members of the steering committee already identified?
We have a representative from Carbondale, we have a representative from Glenwood Springs. And
So you're looking for the counties and Basalt?
we're looking to the counties and Basalt, yes, for an elected official.
Okay.
And we have had one request, though, that if, recognizing that all of you attend a lot of meetings and spend a lot of time in your job as city council members, one of the communities requested that if the council members felt they were overwhelmed with where they were, that they could appoint a non-elected official to the steering committee, who obviously would have to report back in detail and transfer whatever thoughts came out of the elected officials to the meeting.
Okay. And Dave, you had some comments?
Well, just to follow up on your question, we are going to be meeting with Eagle County Commissioners next Tuesday, I believe, and indications are they're very interested. I've had a good series of conversations with Steve Child. I think Pitkin County is very interested, so they're both going to, select someone to work with us on a steering committee. And the main mission of the steering committee is just to put together the intergovernmental agreement that all of the members can review and evaluate and decide whether they want to participate or not. Right now, there's potentially 7 local governments that could possibly be part of this multi-jurisdictional authority. And I'd like to say, based on all of the conversations that we've had and the meetings we've attended, that everybody seems to shake their head yes and agree wholeheartedly that we should be looking at the Roaring Fork Valley as one community with a very mobile workforce, and that it just makes common sense to approach the production of housing on a regional basis, because of the fact that our workforce is so dynamic and it is mobile, and people decide where they're going to live and where they're going to work, not necessarily, because of where they want to be, but what's available. And what's available isn't really working all that well. You can tell by getting out on the highway at 8 o'clock in the morning just how well it's all working. So a regional approach seems to be acceptable to everybody, thinking again of the whole valley as one community. And interestingly, not just about, every community we've talked to has identified a lack of workforce housing as either its number 1 or 2 priority in terms of problems to be resolved, every community. So I think they're all seeing the logic behind taking a regional approach. Forming a multi-jurisdictional authority is going to be challenging enough with 7 different governments involved. But really, the test comes when we go to the voters and ask them for money. Because without money, this regional authority isn't really going to accomplish much. We're going to hold a lot of meetings and talk about how much housing we need, but if we don't have a permanent funding source, we're not going to really be able to accomplish the objectives. And so that's where we need your help, because you're the guys who are in tune with the voters, and you're the ones who can help us create the message that needs to be put out there in order to create this funding source. Just as an example, if we created the boundaries of an authority that would include the Aspen School District and the Roaring Fork School District, which would include the Eagle County areas within the Roaring Fork Valley, and we could generate $10 million a year in taxes out of that authority boundary, we could bond $200 million and start building some housing. This new authority is not going to replace any of the existing housing authorities. It's not going to replace your housing program and the way in which you exact housing from new development. This is going to layer on top of all of that, and we see this authority as simply the production arm of all of the members who are going to participate. And its main mission is simply to produce housing in the most appropriate locations in the valley. And again, considering the valley to be one community, where should the housing be?
I just have one quick housekeeping question, and then I'll go to questions. And that is, it's awesome that you're taking this on. And I guess my question would be, if you've established a committee, or it's almost established, who's handling the administrative staffing side of this? Because, I mean, as you know, we don't have any extra people here, and I'm just curious how that's gonna work.
Me and Bill.
Okay.
We are the staff.
All right.
You're looking at it.
We're looking at it. Now, one of the things that we do, what we also want to do, and we've gotten conceptual buy-in from everyone we've met with, and that is we all recognize that we are going to need to do a needs assessment. We're going to need to take the voters' facts in terms of just how much housing we need and where the logical locations are for it, what economic engines in the valley will be served by putting housing where it belongs, and so on. And so the communities that we've talked to so far are willing to contribute to a needs analysis, which is maybe a $50,000 or $60,000 project. And I've also gotten Chaffa to say that they will match the local government's contribution. So they would throw in $30,000 of a $60,000 study.
Okay.
That's
Makes
not
sense.
answering your questions about staff, but right now, everything is being done on a volunteer basis. And
Like that?
if we put a steering committee together, that's going to be our staff.
Right, okay.
I also want a staff member, probably from the planning department or something that,
Probably not from Basalt.
I think Susan just quit.
Well,
To
let's,
be a liaison.
Davis volunteered when he,
Davis, yes. Susan, probably no.
We volunteered the new manager.
Right, that's easy.
Okay. We had some hands up down here.
I had a question. So, for example, the town of Basalt has affordable housing units that we sort of manage, but we don't really have a dedicated department. It's sort of heaped on the staff. And it's intriguing. Dave and I have talked about the whole concept, and I think it makes sense to look at it regionally. Would you, say in Basalt's case, if Basalt said, hey, we'd like you to manage our units, is that something that might be part of that equation?
well, it certainly could be, but our vision right now, and it seems to be acceptable to the communities that we've talked to, is to utilize either APSHA or Garfield County Housing Authority to keep doing what they're doing, which is to manage the projects that are built, and not to necessarily divert the attention of this regional housing authority from the main mission, which is to produce the product, not necessarily to manage it. But we could. You know, we're going to have a board of directors, and they're going to decide what the mission is going to be. And if this regional authority wants to get into the property management business and managing the deed restrictions and the qualifications and the resales and re-rentals and so on, it certainly could. The statute would allow that.
we have talked with the Garfield County Housing Authority. They appear to be very interested in continuing to manage units. And they may have felt a little threatened by what we were coming up with. But, again, to back up Dave's point, we feel like if we could focus on getting housing built, that should be a direct mission and not dissipate money and time to do something that there's already agencies that are doing that.
I mean, it just seems to me that there's efficiencies in, if there was one, you need a affordable housing unit, and you go to some place, some organization, and say, I'd like to be in Basalt, or I'd like to be in Carbondale, that, you know, you guys get the units built, And then I would think the next step is, what do we do with them? Who's gonna care for those? And I'm sure that's part of this whole conversation, but, you know, just something, food for thought for the town, because we sort of heap it on staff and try to track it, and as we get more units, we need to probably have a department or our own housing authority, which then would be a duplication perhaps. You know, it seems to be if there was one central organization that managed that, be a good idea.
Like a giant chamber. Gary, did you have something?
Yeah, basically, you know, as you know, the Eagle County affordable housing tax went down in the last election, and I think one of the reasons when, you know, as I was trying to sell it to the public, they didn't have identified spaces for what they're gonna do with the money. And that's gonna be, you know, a key piece of the information is if you give me the money, this is what I'm gonna do. If you're willing to tax yourselves, this is what I'm gonna do. And I feel in the Eagle County's case that we just didn't know. So you don't always give money to what you don't know.
Right.
And so that's why Summit County did so well, is they proved that this is what you get when you
Right.
tax yourself. So I definitely support the town helping to invest in a housing needs assessment, because I know Bach has done a pretty good job of identifying places in Basalt, but you need to weigh that overall with every other community's needs. And so, you know, I definitely look forward to that. If I'm gonna support this and move forward, but to do that assessment, because it's gonna be critical to really being able to help us sell it to
Right.
the voters.
We've got to be able to tell the story.
Yeah.
And if we don't tell the story, no matter what we do, it's going to go down.
Down here, anybody? Katie?
Just one quick comment, and that is that what I like about this is that we're starting the conversation in a very serious manner about decoupling affordable housing from mass development, and how that is a burden both on our community, our infrastructure, and developers. Not that the developers should get totally off the hook in this process, but I embrace the conversation of decoupling that relationship. Thank you for looking into that.
Well, if I understand what you're saying, we're certainly not suggesting that any of the communities up and down the valley abandon their mitigation programs.
No, I'm 100%
Yeah, we're-
understanding that. I'm just
but
saying
we're
that the
We're not closing the
conversation-
gap
Right.
with mitigation housing.
I completely understand that, that was very clear, but I'm saying that there's an important conversation that you're starting, and that is decoupling what right now is the main source of generating our affordable housing, and that is development.
Right.
I just want to thank you for taking the time. This is a really important thing. We've needed it, and I really appreciate that you took the time to get this going. Thank you.
And that you have many thousands of volunteer hours ahead of you, I'm sure. So is there a punchline in here of an appointment? And do we have any obvious person?
I will offer myself to the services, as this is what I campaigned upon and what I have been very passionate about, being the council member on Bach, jumping down the rabbit hole of Basalt affordable housing and community housing has been so educational, and it's been one of the greatest learnings in this council seat for me so far, is looking and learning at what other communities have done, and specifically Summit County, and reading their IGA and talking to their past director who brought that forward, seeing their slideshow of how they sold it to the public and the entire process behind it, and having the slogan that I've been walking around with of housing, it's the HAFTA. It's the RAFTA HAFTA, and it's the housing HAFTA. And I know that we can't use that acronym, but it works. And the future is land banking. And part of land banking is raising the money to buy the land. And that's the beauty as well with Bach, is identifying parcels that are, I'm very, very proud of this town. I'm very proud of the staff that works with Bach and the time that that committee puts into identifying what are shovel-ready projects and collaborating and being supportive in this process coming together and thinking outside of Basalt and how can we influence and work together, collaborate with our entire valley, because that's the way to move forward, is thinking of us as a whole, not necessarily as our town independently. And that's what started me down the rabbit hole, was thinking about the town independently and how we administer our employee housing and our affordable housing, and recognizing that it is such a grand, and we're stronger together than we are independently.
So is this gonna be a runoff, or are we going to, like, get a nomination going here?
I nominate Jennifer Riffle to be our official representative and rabbit runner.
Rabbit hole runner?
And indicate our support? Can you add, indicate our support?
And to indicate our support for the concept of Basalt joining in a regional housing authority.
So it's an actual
Second.
motion, not a nomination.
Yes.
It's a motion.
It turned into a motion.
Second.
Further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Thank you all.
Wow.
Thank you very much.
Stay
Thank
up
you.
there, David.
Thanks for
Okay,
coming.
I get to stay here for a minute.
And you should be very proud, because Basalt in the valley, mid-valley down through Glenwood, is far and above producing more housing, affordable housing, than the other two communities combined.
Wow. That's amazing. Thank you. Thank you very much for doing this work.
My pleasure.
Yeah.
I'll give you credit. Thank you very much.
Okay, we had something else that was a housing thing.
Can we check, Madam Mayor?
Yes, sir.
Can we check in with the business school students? Are you surviving? Is this killing you?
They kind of have, some of them have facial expressions even.
You know, we pass around candy to the little kids, and I suppose that we should pass around candy.
I'm the one who eats the candy.
Okay, our next item is an appointment of another housing thing. Basalt's representative on the Eagle County Housing and Development Authority Advisory Committee, EDCHD.
Right, it would be.
Horrible acronym.
It would be easier for an acronym like HAFTA, but this resolution setting up the committee came out of the Eagle County ballot initiative, and if you remember, we had a little subcommittee of business and council folks, and we had made some recommendations for how the committee should be structured. So for the most part, Eagle County Commissioners took our recommendations, and one of those was that in Basalt area, we shouldn't just have one representative, but we should have a representative of the unincorporated area and the town of Basalt. And so they incorporated that, and another recommendation was that in looking at the qualifications, that we were looking for people with citizen interest, and it wasn't just developer or business interest, and they took that recommendation. But specifically, we're here tonight to actually make the town of Basalt's recommendation to the committee, and David Myler expressed interest. And I double-checked with Jill Klosterman that he is in fact, eligible to serve. David is now living in Basalt, and he's worked in Basalt for many, many years. And I'll let David kind of speak to a little bit about his qualifications. He gave us a resume, kind of an outline that I put out in front of you, and I think most of you probably know David, but we thought it was a good segue because of the work that he's doing on the Regional Housing Authority and the work that the committee's going to be doing. And this person is going to be the liaison between the Eagle County Committee and the town of Basalt, and also Bach. So with
Can
that.
I ask a quick question,
Yep.
Susan?
Uh-huh.
This one is not, it says Basalt's representative, but did we have normally a elected official on this?
No, no, this is really the citizen appointment for the committee.
And not to roll over Dave, but I think that we get who Dave is. We can see the work that you're doing for housing. And I mean, I, for one, think this is great that you're willing to now probably travel to go to these meetings.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, I think I
make
would
a
like to have a
motion
notion.
appoint David. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Just
Thank you all.
disclosure, he was thinking about, he may or may not move out of town. I don't know what his current thinking is, but I double-checked with Eagle County, and they said it's really up to the town of Basalt, so.
Great,
We're done.
thank you.
I'm not moving my office.
Um,
I'm always gonna have a connection to the salt and a soft spot in my heart.
all right, good.
So,
Thanks,
if you're,
Dave.
in case you're wondering, my term on CHAFA is expiring in June, and so I was looking for the next housing adventure. And,
It's in
this
your
one-
blood.
This one just seemed to come along and seemed to fit well, so let's give it a try.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Awesome. Bye-bye. Okay, our next item is Basalt River Park, recommended approach on the Basalt River Park improvements. And if, somebody tell me if I'm getting this wrong, but my memory is that we had a conversation about this issue, and it was decided that a subgroup would go have a conversation and take a look and come back to us with a recommendation. And so I asked Mark if he would be willing to deliver this message from that subcommittee, and he said he would. So, Mark Kittle.
Okay, well, we're going on year 4 now since the trailers have been moved, and I understand there was a lot of work to do all that, but at this point, I was a little disappointed a couple months ago that we weren't gonna get some green grass out there on the park, and I mentioned it to Davis, and we did a site visit on Friday. Friday morning, I put together just kind of a rough estimate of what I thought it would cost. And this is just for an acre. There's actually 2 on the part that we own down by the river, but at least this would give us, and an acre's quite a bit. You could go down and have a picnic or whatever, but I come up with about $80,000, and I believe we've got $800,000 in post money. And when I originally put this together, it was for seed, some straw bales, plant it, and get it going. In the interim since then, I've discussed with other people that maybe we could go to sod, which would probably be about $45,000. And my estimate for the seed was like $3,000, so. It would be up to council, but I would like to go, when we go for procurement, to maybe the landscape companies and whatnot, get a couple options, like hydro seed maybe, regular seed with straw, and maybe finally sod, just to see where that number comes in. But at least, we've got the underground out there already for the sprinkler system, and that's including 6 inches of topsoil everywhere, because when we went out and looked, there's a lot of little rocks everywhere. The upright sprinkler systems, you couldn't really go out and play a game of Frisbee without damaging something, either you or the sprinkler. Anyway, I'm thinking for $80,000, and the timeline's up there on the wall,
It's right there, sorry.
so we could have,
Oh, it is on the wall too.
I'm
sorry.
thinking we can maybe beat that deadline a little bit. I was thinking 4th of July, maybe we would have something out there to at least take the family out on a picnic. In the future, whatever's decided, there's not gonna be much activity in that area. The bandstand will be one area that we may have to get some utilities to. Small trenches, nothing deep. I don't think if we invest the $80,000, we're not gonna by any means blow the $80,000. That's just my opinion. I hope these estimates are close. If it comes back twice this much, then maybe we need to look at it again.
Well, just to add to what Mark said, Davis ended up noticing this because it was gonna be, I think, just,
You and me.
yeah, just us with staff. And so it was good that he noticed it because Bernie was around, Jen was around, and so there were 4 of us out there to go out and see how bad that is, and to just throw seed on that, don't waste the $3,000. It would be not usable in any way, and so I think given
Well, let me,
Okay, go
one
ahead.
other thing. There's that big swale down, there's the river, a little ridge, and then a swale. If you get a chance, look at the little swale out by the river. they brought in topsoil there and planted some different seed, and it's way different, and it doesn't look half bad. And that's kind of what I'm thinking this room. This topsoil, water, and fertilizer are your main items. Growing up on the ranch, that was always and water's the important part, so. Gary?
Well, Jen and then Gary, or Gary then Jen, whichever.
So originally, Mark and I we share a view on this, and at first it was, let's just put some lipstick on the pig to get through this summer, and walking around out there, seeing what the options are, hearing citizens, and what's important. We're definitely interested in pursuing a more green, grassy than just bringing it up, definitely a higher notch than just some lipstick. And in addition, what is a positive about putting this out for bid and seeing what it comes back at, and doing this a little more in-house, only hiring a consultant to do the bidding process, is that it frees up, it goes back to our earlier conversation that Davis brought forward per Bernie's suggestion of purchasing the possible entire CDC parcel. And by doing these smaller improvements under 100,000 or around 100,000, that still leaves us a very large amount of money to utilize for purchasing, which is also a community priority. So this is seen as a viable win-win and prudent use of the funds.
Gary?
Yeah, looking at the estimates, I mean, we've been putting out things to bid, and the hardest part is, trying to deal with, how prepping and rough grading comes out, but I feel it's gonna be a little more than 80, looking at this, but I'm willing to, I do hear from a lot of people that we should get something going, because it could take a year or two for us to fully plan what we want, and are we gonna look at a purchase or part purchase or something? And I think that's just gonna take time, and this way, people see that it's usable, it's something where you can go to, so I'd be comfortable just knowing that I think this is a little inexpensive, considering we're also bidding at the really busy time for a lot of contractors. They have a lot of work, but I hope we can get it for around 100, and I think it'll be 100,000 well spent.
Well, we've also got Trameel over there doing the culvert, and I would hope that we get a price from them, because they'll be mobilized on site. And
Okay, that could help.
Yep.
Anybody? Okay. So, let's see, what should we, yeah, Jen?
Mayor, I move that the town council approve the approach described in the agenda summary.
With a top set number of $100,000.
Correct.
Is there a second?
Second.
Further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Good job.
Thank
Mark.
you.
Thank you, guys.
Seriously, I mean, I think the community expects nothing less than this, and.
We're on it. They're not expecting much more either, I don't think.
Probably not. Okay, so, let's see, our last action is a resolution 9, reducing building permit fees for the Basalt Fire Station 41. James?
Thanks. This is consideration of a resolution that would reduce building permit fees for the expansion of Basalt Fire Station 41. At the last meeting, the council had a discussion about the request from the fire district and provided direction to staff to bring back a resolution that would waive the plan review fees, the energy fees, and then cut the building permit fees in half, which would be a reduction of about $19,000 in their total fee package. The justification that the council provided at the last meeting for the reduction was, one, that this was a life safety facility and that it was different than other facilities, and then two, that the fire district had provided the town and the police department
space without rent for quite a few years. So that was the justification provided. So staff this evening would recommend, Scott apparently isn't here, so.
Scott called me today and he had
Okay.
other engagements. And
Okay.
I beat somebody up if they disagreed on this. You have it in you at 7:30?
Beat up somebody or everybody?
So staff would suggest taking any questions that you have and then providing council discussion.
Any questions on this? I think it's approximately what we talked about at the last meeting and did some, we think so, kind of motions with our heads.
I'll make
Yes,
a
Bernie.
motion. Let's see. Mayor, I make a motion that we pass resolution number 9, series of 2017, reducing building permit fees for the Basalt Fire Station 41 expansion.
Second.
Further discussion?
Aye.
All in favor?
Aye.
Still, I got it. I got what you meant.
Yeah.
Okay, that was our actual last agenda item. And we do have an executive session on the agenda. And so, just because people have been asking me what the story is on the executive session, I'm going to let Tom introduce, before we go into executive session, why this is an executive
Okay,
session.
so, I guess the short version is that the council has had an informal. For the reminder, the council has had an informal process for a number of years. That was started by Mike Scanlon, where we had sort of a informal pre-application process in which town council was involved that frequently led to the adoption of pre-development agreements with potential developers. And some issues have arisen in connection with that going forward, and I want to discuss it with the council in executive session because there are some potential legal issues in terms of the pros and cons of that procedure.
Okay. Pam?
Is there any reason we couldn't do it in public?
I'm not going to give you legal advice in public unless you, I mean, I'm very uncomfortable with that.
Pam?
And just as a formality, of course, are we going to record this?
Mike, please.
Are we going to record this item?
No.
Sorry, I'm going to throw some questions.
So, do we have a motion to go into executive session?
Mayor, I move that the town council enter executive session for a conference with our attorney for the purpose of receiving legal advice on specific legal questions in accordance with CRS 24-6-402 4B, more specifically to discuss the use of the pre-application process for Keelty Residential Project, Jadwin RV Resort, CDC property, and other properties.
Second.
Okay, before we have a motion on this, I just want to thank Bennett and his class for coming in tonight. The reason that we're going to ask you to leave now is that this executive session that we're talking about is about legal issues, and so the cameras will be off, the recorders will be off, and we can't have any members of the public here. So thank you so much for coming, and we actually really enjoyed your company. Come back.
Aye.
Yeah.
Aye.
You're welcome.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? May the record show that Mark Kittle has departed.
And for the record, this doesn't need to be recorded. And it doesn't need to be recorded because exclusively for legal advice. No action will, of course, be taken in executive session.
You pretty much killed it. Okay, we, as council, did discuss exactly what we said we were going to do in the executive session, and we will continue the discussion regarding the application process at a future meeting. This meeting's adjourned.
Motion to adjourn.
John?
Aye.
Aye.
But that is
Yay, yay, yay.
Yes.
Thank you, everyone.